Well, good morning, Grace City. I think a series called Distinctive needs to have like a distinctive intro into it and a distinctive attire. Do you like the things that pastors will do to try to make a statement, right? This is at least the things that this pastor will try to do to make things memorable and to make a statement. What do you think? Is it good? Is this a look that we want to go for from here on in? No, I don't think so either. But there's something, isn't there, about I think the last time I wore something like this, I was thinking about it, was back in my school ball, which is like 1, 2, 3, more than 10 years ago. But it's kind of nice to put a tuxedo on and to actually, look like this again. But some things that are distinctive, aren't they? They stand out. In fact, you think about our iconic symbol of New Zealand, our iconic kiwi. This picture here of the bird that can't fly. It's iconic. It's distinctive. Here's another picture of you think about penguins. I didn't realize that penguins were in the category of birds. I knew they couldn't fly, but I didn't realize they were a category of a bird. But again, penguins are distinctive. In fact, they have kind of that tuxedo as well. They could be on the category of birds that wear tuxedos, don't you think? Or you think about other things that are distinctive. You think of things like this, that iconic red umbrella. You think of the travel that you might have done overseas, and the tourist guide holds up that iconic umbrella. It stands out, so the tour group knows this is who we're following to get us from point A to point B. Well, in this series, we're looking about, at the question, what makes followers of Jesus distinctive? How is it that Christians are meant to stand out? Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, you might wonder what's on that list. And I would imagine you might come up with some things that you think should be on that list. They might not actually be all that positive. And the perception, or whether it's real or perceived, we can often think about Christians being known for a judgmental spirit, perhaps arrogant. They like to keep to themselves. It might be pastors who wear flamboyant suits. It might be the way they rally around kind of against the progressive direction of culture with angry voices and calls to take our culture back to what it was. And as a result, it's really easy for followers of Jesus, for the church, to be known for what it's against. And if that's been your perception of Christians, the church, I'm sorry if that's been your experience. Because that's not what our founder, Jesus, established for what he wanted the church, his community of faith, to be known for. Because when you come down to what Jesus said, he wasn't about what we're against. He wanted us to be known for what we're for. And so each week during this series, we're going to be looking at a distinct trait. And you can think of these traits that we're going to be looking at effectively as the attire that we need to wear in order to stand out in our society, to stand out in our places of work, in our neighborhoods, in our families. And it's not by what we're against, it's by what we are for. And so today is really an umbrella distinctive I want us to look at. I'm using that term again deliberately, going back to the tourist who holds up that iconic red umbrella. This is the umbrella concept that all of the distinctive that we're going to be looking at over these next 4 or 5 weeks all come back to this one. And you can think of it almost like Jesus being that guide for us. He's the one holding that red umbrella, guiding us to where he wants us to be. But of course, we're not tourists, we are followers of Jesus. But he wants to take us from where we are to where he wants us to be and what he wants us to be known for. And so this is a verse in John chapter 13 about one trait he wants us to be known for. So he gives a commandment here. Now, when I think about commands, or when I think about imperatives, I normally think about, don't do this, don't do that. It's always like the do nots. What I love about what Jesus says, it's nothing about the don't do's. It's everything about this is what I want you to do. One thing, one trait, one commandment. This is what he says. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. In other words, it's like love is the tuxedo that we wear. Love is what helps us to stand out all around us wherever we are. Now, for many of us, when we hear what Jesus has to say here, we kind of go, well, that's not really new. I've heard that before. And honestly, it was the same for the disciples 2,000 years ago. They had heard things like this before too. But I wonder if it's like the last time I wore a tuxedo. It's been a while, and often things tend to change over time, particularly around this kind of area of my world right now. I'm kind of taking on that dad bod. And so often it's like hard to get back into the attire that I used to wear. But I wonder if it's the same with this whole concept of love. We might have been practicing it at one point. At one point, it might have been something we were known for in the way that we would respond and act. But over time, it's almost like we start to change, and it's hard to fit into that posture, that attire again. But what Jesus says, no, this is the command. This is what I want you to wear, this distinctive element of love. So what does Jesus mean when he tells us to love? Because it sounds a bit touchy-feely, doesn't it? Because love is hard to define. I mean, think about it. If I asked you to define music, you might say, well, music is the science of the art of tones. I mean, does that help you? It's a definition. It's real. But if you really want to describe music, you need to probably hear the melody, hear those notes being played. I would actually play you a song, and then you try to describe it. But it's not something, you can define it, but it's not, it's just cold. You actually see it, you embody it, you experience it, then you can just describe music. Or I might say to you, about diamonds. Define what a diamond is. And you could say to me, well, diamonds are native carbon in an isometric crystal. And that might give you like a passing grade on a geology exam, but you don't have to know the definition of a diamond when you just simply kneel down and you hold up that case and you hold up that engagement ring to the person you're proposing to, and that makes all the difference. So seeing that diamond glitter and sparkle, that's the experience that we want, right? And so when Jesus talks about love being this distinctive element, we don't need to try to find a way to define it. We just need to see the way he showed us what that love is like so that we could experience it, we could model it from Jesus' life. And the good news, of course, is that Jesus shows us that. He models love to us and even clarified what he wants from us here in this verse. He says, so now I'm giving you a new commandment, love each other just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Just love like I've loved. Do as I do. So, when we do that, effectively, we're wearing this tuxedo that Jesus gives to us in order to stand out, and the way we're meant to stand out is to embody the very same love that Jesus had for other people around him. So today, I want to look at 4 characteristics of the distinctive love that we see expressed in the life of Jesus. And if we love in the same way, Jesus says we will stand out, not for what we're against, but for what we are for. So trait number 1. Distinctive love is a love that extends to all people. Now Jesus spoke about this a lot. He modeled this a lot. In fact, one of my favorite passages, a very challenging passage, this is what it says in Luke chapter 6. Love your, say it, enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then, here's the result. Then you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. Now, I've recently heard a newly released contemporary Kiwi translation of this verse that goes something like this. Do you want to hear it? Well, I'll tell you anyway. It says this, love your enemies, except in political seasons. Then you can act and react like everyone else. It goes on, love your enemies, except that colleague who did, can fill in the gap. Except that person who said, except that neighbor who always, and it's really easy, isn't it, to place exemptions to what Jesus said. But here's the thing, if we actually start to place exemptions, the The love that Jesus calls us to embody and to give to others is no longer distinct. Everyone can rally up love for people who like them and are just like them. Everyone can find some semblance of love towards people who speak the same language, who look the same, who think the same, who vote the same. But the love Jesus is talking about is a distinctive type of love that goes out to people who don't even like you and that are unlike you. That's distinctive. And that's the love that Jesus modeled in the way he extended love to all people groups. The religious people of the day, you might be aware of this, but they had phrases to describe people who they would like to keep secluded from other people, particularly themselves. And it was like a disdain. They would talk about the, quote, tax collectors and prostitutes or the sinners. It was almost like this group of people. And when we read about those people today, it's really easy for us to almost redefine who those people are in a way that's palatable, in a way that we're no longer challenged by them, that we would actually find it easy to be in the same room with them ourselves. And I think we actually misunderstand the reality of this group that the religious people were shunning, a group that Jesus welcomed. For instance, often when people talk about tax collectors, I wonder if in their mind they have somebody who would be a contemporary of someone who works in the Inland Revenue Department. And it's true, if you're at a party and somebody says to you, I work at the IRD, it's a bit of a conversation stopper. It's like, I'm not sure if I want to chat with them. Sorry if that's you, by the way, connecting today. But, just being honest, transparent, that's how we often feel. But that's not what the tax collectors were back in Jesus' day. Effectively, the tax collectors of Jesus' day would be like tax cartels with all the scruples of a modern-day crack dealer. Let me explain that for a bit. See, at the time in the country of Judea, this time of Jesus, it was a subjugated country under the control of the Romans. And the Romans had learned to not take on prisoners, but to allow people to live freely as long as they pay tax to Rome. But of course, to pay tax, you need to know what people have and what people are earning. And this is in a day where people don't have bank accounts, they don't really declare their income through some system that we might have today. And so the way you did that if you were Rome is you found people that knew other people. And so in this case, it would be Jewish people who knew Jewish families and friends that could go back a long way. And so you would appoint them as a tax collector. They were hated, obviously, by their peers. And so they would come in and go, well, I know their family over there. I know when you look at them, you would think they're quite poor because, look at the way they wear or, live or things like that. But actually, I know for a fact they've got 90 sheep over in Bethlehem. They're loaded. And so, that tax collector would say, you can tax them X percentage because that's what they have. But as often comes, when people have, when there's money involved or positions of power, there's often corruption that comes into this. It was true then as it is today. And so some of those people, you can imagine that person who owned the 90 sheep might come to the tax collector and say, can we negotiate here? How about you say, I've got like 45 sheep, and I'll give you a cut on the rest, and just be between you and me. And so that's the reputation the tax collectors began to have, as they took advantage of their peers, and they exploited the relationship, a privileged relationship, and they became filthy rich in the fullest sense of the term. Effectively, they operated this tax cartel. They took advantage of their own people. Today, you think about them being the loan sharks of today who get rich on the misfortunes of others. Just think about that for a bit, because I think this is where it starts to feel uncomfortable for us. If I was hanging out with a loan shark who was financially abusing people in our city, and you saw me having a coffee or dinner at their home, laughing away with them, I think you would raise an eyebrow or two. And yet this is who Jesus is welcoming and loving. Or think about the prostitutes. In one of the stories of Jesus, we read that a prostitute poured expensive perfume over Jesus' feet and washed his dirty feet with her hair. So what would you say if you saw her doing that and you were in the room? Well, we know what the religious leaders said, because we hear they sneered. If this man were a prophet, if he was really a godly person, he would know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is, the category thing again, that she's a sinner. She's going to seduce you. She's going to her and her ilk are going to lead you away, keep them at a distance. So just think about this for a bit, because I think we're meant to feel a bit uncomfortable about maybe some of the categories we often place people in. So even now, with all the political debates and discussions happening, some would say, whether it's real or perceived, to me that's beside the point today, but some political spectrums would place people, respond to people who are on the wealthy part. Maybe filthy rich might be a term that people would use. And then other people would go, no, we need to be there for the poor and the oppressed and the marginalized. And often you have these different political discussions about who we should be responding to. And the interesting thing I want you to see is the way Jesus loved all groups, both groups. He extended his love to the filthy rich. He extended his love to the downcast and the abused, to all people. And he says to you and to me, I want you to go and do the same. Yeah, but JD, that they abuse power. Those people would risk your reputation. But Jesus never ignores the realities, the truth. He steps in and will still speak and challenge, but he's known for what he's for. That he's for welcoming all people, regardless of who they are and what they do. So, question for you. Who might be the people that you least want to be around? I want you to really think about that for a minute. You know, it's almost like in the category of if you were a Greenpeace member and you came across the CEO of an oil company, would you welcome them? Or vice versa, would you welcome them? Oh, who are those people for you? It might be a person or a group of people that just repulse you. But actually, Jesus says, I want you to love the way that I love. And I want you to love people who are unlike you and don't even like you. Because if you just love the people who are like you, that's normal. Everybody does something like that. But distinctive love, the love that Jesus gives to us, is a distinctive love that extends to all people. So question, why is this distinctive trait so important to Jesus? And the answer, if you hadn't seen it, is because this is the way God loves us. His love is available to all people, all types of people. So if we make love kind of exclusive to particular groups rather than inclusive to everybody, we're not loving like God does. God doesn't single you out and exclude somebody else. He welcomes everybody to be part of his family. He is for everybody. And so he wants that love to be available and extended to everybody as well. That's trait number one. So if trait number one looks at the who do we love aspect, trait number two looks at how we love. So distinctive love is a love seen in tangible actions, not just words. That's the second trait. So how did Jesus embody this second trait? Well, we see the way he kind of met the tangible needs of people around him. In fact, isn't this the way Jesus would attract large crowds of people? You know, we see the way people would flock to Jesus because he fed them, he healed them, he helped them. Now, Jesus also did a lot of talking, but let's be honest, the crowd didn't always understand what he was saying. They found it confusing at times, but they did like what he did for them. The way he welcomed all people and the way he displayed that love in very tangible actions meeting real needs. So think about one story, pretty famous story of the way Jesus takes 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish and he feeds a multitude. In that story, we read that there's like 5,000 men along with their families. Now, I'm not sure why it's just the men who are counted, but it's reasonable to say if you've got 5,000 men, you've probably got 5,000 women and plus children. We know there's at least one kid there because he's got the lunchbox with all that food that gets shared and distributed to everybody in this amazing miracle. So you're talking about maybe like 10,000 people. And why that's important here is that it's a large crowd. Particularly when you observe that archaeologists have identified that the towns close to that event, towns like Capernaum and Bethsaida, had about 2,000 or 3,000 inhabitants each. In other words, this is a massive crowd coming from all over the place, attracted to who Jesus is. So why are they coming? Because I think we often skim past the why. Why are they flocking to Jesus? And I think that the key reason is they loved the way Jesus welcomed everybody because they often felt excluded by the religious leaders. And Jesus would meet their physical needs in some way. And in this story, that's what happens. Jesus takes 5 loaves and 2 fish that a kid had in his lunchbox, and he miraculously multiplies it to feed like every single person there with enough left over at the end. And it's interesting how Jesus paused and he considered their physical needs as important. Sometimes after a service, people might grab me and say, JD, love the way, we're doing that budgeting service and all those kind of things, but we really need to be more focused on kind of the soul, maybe other people can do that, but we need to be about the soul. But if we're going to love like Jesus loved, we need to do what Jesus did. And Jesus took care of the physical and emotional needs of people, not just the spiritual needs of people. So we can't just ignore physical and emotional and relational needs. We need to do what Jesus said and did. In fact, elsewhere, Jesus unpacks this more. He says over in Matthew, I love this, no one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, can you say those two words? Let your good deeds, say it again, your good deeds. Not just the way you talk about eternity to come and invite people into their space, but let your good deeds shine out for all to see so that everyone will praise your Heavenly Father. So again, words matter. Our words are part of the way that we love, but Jesus says good deeds are the way we stand out. This is like the tuxedo that we wear, this distinctive element of love. And so other writers in the New Testament pick up on this, like Peter. He says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. James talks about the need to bring faith and works together. He says, just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without good works. I mean, you just can't ignore good works, good deeds, and the way this relates to the distinctive love that Jesus calls us to embody. So again, same question. Why is this distinctive element of love so important to Jesus? And I think the answer is it points to a bigger reality. You see, even here in the story of the bread and fish, when Jesus meets their physical needs, he then straight after the story points to a bigger reality. And so he says to the crowd, I am the bread of life. I mean, it's like masterful in the way Jesus does this. The way he takes simple bread that is used to feed the crowd and then points to a bigger reality, to say something effectively to go, you realize, of course, I've just met your physical need, but you actually have this spiritual hunger that needs spiritual living bread. And I'm that living bread. I want you to know that there is a hunger that you have that can't be satisfied with simple bread and butter. There's something inside of you that hungers for something more, and you know it's there. You experience like every single day, and you want in on that. You just don't know what to do about it. I'm here to respond to that big desire, that eternal drive that you have inside you. I mean, Jesus is a master of the way he links a physical or emotional need somebody has and direct it to the bigger need. And this week, all of us are going to have opportunities to do that. It might be in your home, it might be at school, it might be in the place you're working, and you'll come across need, and you've got an opportunity to respond to that need. So what might you do? A couple of opportunities. One of those might be that you come across a household who's going through grief, or a household that just needs some extra food right now, and you could either, bake something yourself and help in that way, or we even have like manna meals here. We have like a freezer full of food, and so you could even just call the office and say, oh, could I come around and grab like 5 of the meals that have been made and drop them off to a friend or a colleague that I have? You can do that. We have stacks of food here that people are making. They want it to go out. There might be one opportunity. Another would be what you heard mentioned before, our community project at Riverenda School this next weekend. So for many years, our East Campus, our East location, has been serving in this way. So every year they choose a school out in East Auckland, and then they go and take the entire weekend to serve in that local school. So much so that over the years of doing this now, there is a reputation that we have got from our East congregation of the way they do this. And so schools now line up and like, oh, I hope there's us this year. I hope there's us. Because it's got well known among schools for the school makeovers that happen. And so we can be part of this. You can be part of that the whole weekend. You might just sign up for like a 2-hour shift. And so again, details are up here. You can go to the QR code and just sign up for 2 hours. Just as a way of meeting other people who make up Grace City, or just serving a need for free, because that's what God does to us. So it might be through water blasting or painting or food distribution or looking after kids or gardening, whatever it is. It's one of those opportunities in front of us. So I want to just pitch for that as well as another idea. So, seeing two of the four traits. First of all, it's about the who. Distinctive love is a love that extends to all people. And then the how. Distinctive love is seen in tangible actions and not just words. The next trait is about the extent of love. Distinctive love is a love seen in sacrifice. Oh, it's not a word we like anymore, is it? Real love is free, but genuine real love, there's always a cost. And that cost is always charged to the person who's doing the loving. So it might be a cost to your reputation. Someone misunderstands why you would reach out and welcome and help that person. And your name, your reputation might be damaged for a bit. It might be a cost to you financially. Your help comes out of a wallet that is already too thin, and yet you see a need and you respond to it. It's a sacrifice. Or it might be a cost to your time. It's already a precious commodity, hard to find. Or a cost to your energy. You already feel depleted, and then you're like doing X, you're trying to respond. You see, when love is freely given, it always involves a sacrifice of some sort. And I think that's appropriate to identify that when Jesus gives us all this commandment, he does so on the very night, within hours he is about to be arrested. The very next day he's going to be crucified. The ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate display of love. And this is what he's calling us to do as well. I was thinking about the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 just these past couple of days, and I was struck again by the background story here. It happened after a long, tiring ministry trip. Jesus is tired. The disciples are utterly exhausted. They're depleted. So we read this. The disciples returned to Jesus from their ministry tour. Then Jesus said, well, let's go up by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. Oh, man, that sounds good. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they're hungry, they're tired. Oh, the rest is in sight. Finally, fantastic. But listen to this. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving. And so people from many towns, remember they're like 10,000 people, ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as they stepped from the boat, and he said, oh, please, this is like time out. We need to get away from these people. No, he had compassion on them. And I was thinking about this just over the past couple of days. As John mentioned earlier, we hosted actually 2 events this week when we gathered 95 leaders together over those 2 events to just explore multiplication. And, Capital Seed Church, looking at well over 150 churches planted through our nation, which is actually really achievable, but talk about that another day. But, fantastic times, and yet at the end of those days, I was shattered. And so, you get to the end of like Thursday night into Friday, I was just like, oh, I just need a break. And then I was again reading this in a sense of resonance and surprise at even in the midst of weariness, the way Jesus still steps out to serve. And I want us to feel this point for a bit, because it's appropriate that we talk about well-being, and we're doing that as a church, and we need to. But there's also this tension that we need to feel with sacrifice. So we need time to rest, we need time to Sabbath, but we also need time to realize it's not always without that tension. As a Christian community, if we focus solely on well-being and balance and boundaries, we're going to miss the sacrificial nature of genuine love that always costs something. And I don't think there's a more important time than right now for our wider city, for our wider country, to see a distinctive love that is expressed in sacrifice. People don't need to know what we're against, they need to know what we are for, and they need to see it modeled. Because let's face it, New Zealand is going through significant change. And there was a time in our history when people saw the church, if not positive, it was at least saw the church as people who might be weird but harmless. But no more. Our people now see the church as dangerous. And they see the teaching of Jesus at odds with the values of society. And so many people want to cancel our Christianity. And so if you don't feel this, I can assure you that your children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews feel this or will feel this soon. So what do? Well, a natural response might be to fight, to take up political arms, to kind of claim back our territory, to let it be known what we're against. What Jesus does here, though, is he calls us to love with a love that involves sacrifice. So when you see opportunities to serve and to give, rather than respond, well, I've got enough going on already, we're already stretched, it's actually a distinctive love that sacrifices. I can't ever recall people that have ever said to me, I've got a lot of time on my hands at the moment, so where can I serve? Or I've got so much money in my account that I have no idea what to do with it. No, normally when people give and serve, it comes from a sense of depletion. It comes from a sense of, I don't know how to kind of work this all through. Again, it might be a sacrifice of your time. It takes you away from something you would actually prefer to be doing. Or a cost of money where you can't purchase this item over here because there's actually a need to respond to. Or a cost of energy where you're stepping out even though you already feel quite tired and depleted. See, the way Jesus modeled this love is through sacrifice. And interestingly, it's what you see in the early church as well. Interesting, when you go back through history, you can find that the church struggled with all the same things that we struggle with today. And I think you could easily say that Rome was trying to cancel out the message of Jesus and Christianity as well. So 2,000 years ago, Rome was somewhat afraid of this small but growing group of Jesus followers. They tried persecution, they tried stripping people of their titles, their roles, their income streams. History even tells us that Emperor Nero took some Christians and he invited them to the party and he set them up as these human candles. So just gross acts that he would do as he sought to cancel out Christianity, literally. So how did the church respond? Because even historians often go, well, Judaism was already marginalized, and here's this group of Christians. There's 120 or so of them when Jesus left. So how did this small, tiny group go on to become the majority faith community throughout the known world? And historians, whether they're Christians or not, all land with the same answer. It was a distinctive love. And that distinctive love is what we've been talking about. It was extended to all people. At that time, people were very class conscious, very race conscious, but the early Christians displayed a love that welcomed all people. They loved rich and poor, free people and slaves, Romans, Jews, Greek, Samaritan. They loved people who liked them. They loved people who were unlike them. It's what made them stand out. Their distinctive love was also seen in tangible actions. In fact, we have a letter that archaeologists have from one of the emperors who lived 300 years after Jesus. His name was Julian. And he was concerned that the pagan religion was declining and Christianity was increasing rapidly. And he was like, well, what do? We need to turn this around. We need to cancel them out and increase what we're doing, but maybe we can learn something from what they're doing. And so effectively, he gets this group together. It's like a focus group. They're marketing sessions, trying to work out what to do. And he says this is his calculation. He says, I think that when the poor happened to be neglected and overlooked by the priests, he's talking about his own pagan priests, so they didn't look to the poor at all. He says the impious Galileans, that's his phrase for the Christians. He thought about them being impious or irreligious because, well, we can't even see the God they worship. It's invisible, they're like atheists in his mind. But he says these Christians observed this and devoted themselves to benevolence, to doing good deeds. These impious Galileans, the Christians, support not only their poor, but ours as well. Everyone can see that our people lack aid from us. We've never thought about caring for the poor. But the Christians, this is a different community. They have this distinctive love that responds in tangible action. And not only that, but historians talk about the sacrifices that were made. The Roman Empire at the time went through a whole lot of different plagues, like the Cyprian plague in 249 to 262. You can read about it on Wikipedia. Apparently, in the city of Rome, just for one city, it was estimated at the peak of that plague, 5,000 people a day were dying. One historian calculated that the city of Alexandria dropped from 500,000 people to 190,000 during the plague. from not just death, but also from people just escaping the city, as I think many of us have come to understand. But what do the Christians do? Well, apparently they moved into the cities to take care of the sick and to be of assistance, even at great risk to their own lives. And so Tertullian, one of the early church leaders of the time, summed it up so well. He says this: "It is our care of the helpless, our practice of loving kindness that brands us in the eyes of many of our opponents. Only look," they say, "look how they," can you say that word? "Love one another." You see, this is the distinctive posture that they wore, the tuxedo of love, seen in sacrifice. One final characteristic. Distinctive love is a love first received and then given. But before I can give out real love, I need to receive real love. The only reason we can really love like this is because Jesus first loved us like this. He sees us, which means we can see others. He understands us, which means we can understand others. He includes us, which means we can include others. He forgives us, which means we can forgive others. He knows you through and through, and despite your deepest fears, he still loves you. And he doesn't just say, "I would die for you." He can say, "I did die for you. I love you that much." And if you have never experienced his love, today, this very moment, you can respond in the quietness of this moment, and we'll pray in a moment, and you can talk to Jesus yourself. To just say, "Jesus, I want to be in for you. I want to be included in your family. I want to receive this new identity. I want to receive your love." And it all begins by receiving the unexpected love of Jesus. And so, there's a lot of angst going on in our society. And we all see it, we experience it in our places of work or at school or at uni and our neighborhoods and the catch up with friends. But rather than be known for what we're against, may we listen to what Jesus says here and be known for what we're for, a distinctive love. And that distinctive love is a love that extends to all people, a love seen in tangible actions, a love that involves sacrifice, and a love that is first received and then given. Oh, may we stand out with that kind of distinctive love. Would you join with me in standing today as we pray? Our team's going to come up and lead us in our final song. But let's talk to Jesus, the one who embodies love. And so, Jesus, we ask that you would bring people to mind, even right now, of people that we need to do a better job of including. Would you bring ideas or actions to mind right now of ways that you would like us to step out in obedience to your prompting, to display your love towards other people? Forgive us for the times where our angry voices have really been more about what we're losing, more than the heart that you have for all people. And just in the quietness of this moment too, if you're connecting online or in this room today and you don't yet know Jesus in a personal way, why don't you talk to Jesus? Just in your own words. There's no magical words, there's no formula to go through, but it's just a sense of going, Jesus, I want a relationship with you. Just talk to him as you would talk to a friend, because he wants to hear from you. And that's where it all starts. Just in that conversation you have, even right now, with Jesus. And as we give out that love towards other people, sometimes it's just that we need a moment, even now, where we just say, God, I need you to just touch my life in a special way today. To remind me that you see me, you hear me, you love me. And just sense that some of you are in that space where you just need a special touch from God's Spirit with His love. If that's where you're at today, I just want you, just as we're standing here, just to raise your hand today. Say, that's what I need. It might be that you're going through something physically and you just want God to meet you in that moment of need and to provide healing in some way. If that's you, I just want to invite you to raise your hand. Or it might be just a sense of anxiety or just what you're feeling emotionally and just need God to meet you in that moment. Again, just to be able to raise your hand. Or it might be that you have a friend or a family member and you just have a real angst for them and you just need God to turn up in their lives. Again, just raise your hand. That sense of saying, God, I want you to meet me. I need you to meet me in this way with your tangible love. The love you have for all people that's without limit. The team's going to lead us in a song right now, and just invite you to keep your hand up. And if other people around you have their hand up, can you, I know this is out of our comfort zone, but just those of you in the orbit, if you can just rally around them, pray for them today. You don't need to ask them what to pray for. I mean, you can, but they don't need to, if you've got your hand up, you don't need to say anything. But maybe just come around and place your hand on their shoulder and just say, pray for God's love to come through in a special, profound way for them today. Can we do that? I know it's out of our comfort zone, but while the band's leading us, let's just gather around. And if you still want somebody to pray for you, just keep your hand up. As we become a community of faith that responds to each other's needs and loves as Jesus loves us, let's continue to worship.